A huge hello to you and welcome to our online community. We're so glad that you're joining us wherever that may be from, be it right here on the Sunshine Coast, hopefully not stuck in ISO, but I know a bunch are, or whether you're joining from further afield. We're so glad that you've chosen to join our online community this morning. We're going to be talking this morning about being in good company. You know, have you ever heard the saying that you are what you eat? You know, we know that applies to our diets and what we put in our body and how that affects our energy and everything in our life, really. The same goes for the company that we keep. You know, you are what you eat, you are the company that you keep. So we're going to talk about what impact the communities and circles that we operate in have upon our lives. Thanks so much for joining us. If there's any way our team can help you, please let us know through our socials. You can always DM us at any time. If you have a question, there's no question too silly, we'd love to answer. Or if you just want to connect with our community, please do through our socials. Hope you enjoy this message today in good company.
Crushed it. That was the face of every single bloke during worship time on a Sunday morning. In good company. We're going to follow Caius's relationship experience over the next month. Man, it is so good to have you here. I'm Jono. That was my wife, Chloe, before the pastor's here. If you're new, thank you so much for being with us here today. Those joining online, we miss you. Today, our Canberra community aren't joining us online. They're live in the building. A bunch of our team are down there today. They launched their first Sunday night service tonight as well, which is super cool. So the Stack's going on. Make sure you scan the QR code on the seat that you're sitting on right now. Stack's ways to get involved this year. Now, if you're someone who's not normally in church, you're not a Christian, somehow you found yourself watching or in the building this morning, this is cool you're here for this series. This series isn't about our church. We're discussing the idea of the church, and this is important because so much of the Christian faith is wrapped up in the community of Jesus followers. And I know a lot of people list the reason, this is why we're having this conversation, a lot of people list the reason why they have trouble with God, why they have trouble with faith, not because there's anything that they've experienced bad about Jesus. You know where I'm going with this, right? They've experienced something bad with Jesus followers. And so I think it's important for us to talk about this. There's always stuff in the media. In the past few weeks, there's been a ton in Australia where churches and different events that take place in local churches all over the country can cause some kind of debate or ringworld, all those things. So we're like, it's a good time to talk about this. And so if you're a Jesus follower as well, if you're part of Suncoast Church, again, this is important for us to talk about because church is not about me or Chloe or those on staff here. It's you. This is your family. This is where you're raising your children. This is where your life is going to be fed and flourish and contribute. So it's important we have this conversation. So I want to start by asking the question, what makes you happy? If you had a week to do whatever you want, someone took all your responsibilities. If you're married here, there's no like guilting and you're going to have to pay for this later. Like you had a free week to do whatever you want. Budget wasn't an issue. You could just go for it. What would you be found doing? I know what I'd do. I've thought about this a lot. I'd go snowboarding. Simple. You knew I was going to say that, didn't you, Chloe? Find a mountain, find with lots of snow, strap some wood onto my feet, and just enjoy it. So I don't know what you do, but I had the opportunity to do this a couple of years back. Chloe and I living abroad, and so I was like, let's go to the snow. And Chloe'd never skied before, so she had her own little ski instructor in the Swiss Alps. So I left her alone, and so I had a week to myself, and I was like, this is amazing, all by myself. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to wait for anyone. I don't have to try to be as good as anyone else. I can just do my thing. So I thought this was going to be the best week. It took about half a day. I've lost half the crowd already. It's not boring, you know. That's my happiness. It's not yours. So it didn't take half a day, and I was like, what isn't right about this? This is meant to be bliss. Like, it's just not as banging as I thought it was going to be. Like the mountains were beautiful. It was like, snow was great. Why wasn't it fun? And it dawned on me when I had a massive stack that day. I was going out, I somehow like did a wrong turn, and I got absolutely hammered. And as I was laying there, I was like, This is the problem. You know why? No one to share the experience with. There's no one there to go, yeah, man, there's a sick jump, or how good's the snow? There's no one to just chat to. All the people on the ski list with me were Germans, and they were all snobs because I wasn't skiing, I was snowboarding, so no one talked to me. And I realized there's no one to share the stoke with. Now, if you're like a surfer or a skateboarder or do anything sideways, you know to share the stoke, right? There's no one to share the stoke with. And I need you because I don't have much stoke. I'm not very good at it. So I need someone to be like, yeah, you got like 3 feet of air that time, Jono, for the Napoleon Dynamite people out there. Anyways, but also there was no one there to be like, Jono, you're right. You got axed, you know. There's no one to share my pain. I'm like, dude, like that was a massive stack. And it reminded me in that moment of an age-old axiom. You've probably heard this before. The idea, and I think there's incredible truth to it, that a grief shared is halved and a joy shared is doubled. Isn't that true? So that's why, like, when we want to celebrate something, I'm going to go put on my own party hat and one of those little things by yourself. Like, no one does that. It's like, you know, Lieutenant Dan in the pub and Forrest Gump on the New Year's Eve night where he's just sitting there by himself. Like, no one wants to be that guy all by themselves having a party, right? You invite people to hang. That's another movie reference. I'm going to keep trying it, like, just see if you guys get along with it this morning. But because you want to share it, right? It's like, it helps you celebrate things that are worth celebrating. And also, when you've lost something, you just need someone there. And sometimes you've been that person, and maybe someone in your family is going through this right now where you're grieving. You've lost a loved one or lost an opportunity, or maybe you lost something you valued highly. And you just need to be there. Sometimes you don't have the words to say, but just being there helps to take some of the weight of the grief. So it's this idea of sharing, being together. There's something in the human experience that our Heavenly Father has created us to share life. In fact, right at the beginning of our Old Testament, the Jewish scriptures, in the book of Genesis, right at the start, it tells the story of Adam and Eve. And before Eve was created, the whole kind of thrust behind God's agenda there, he said, it's not good for man to be alone. Which, think about this. Adam was with God. So you can say, well, he wasn't alone. But as if to say, God was like, listen, I'm not enough. I've wired and designed you to be with people. It's kind of the human creation, how God wired us. And this dynamic, sharing, doing life together, was fundamental and core right at the beginning of the New Testament church. After the death and resurrection of Jesus, Jesus' followers started gathering, started growing. And this idea of sharing, of doing community, of togetherness, was like one of the hallmarks of the New Testament church. Now, granted, this isn't exclusively a Christian thing. And if you're someone who's not a Christian and, you know, doesn't even believe in God or not part of a church, you think, well, you don't have to be a Christian to like hang out with people and do community, and you're 100% correct. But what was unique about this, particularly with the first followers of Jesus in the first century, is that in the ancient world, the idea of faith practices, faith gatherings, religious services, they were an act of duty. They were never an act of joy. So what separated the Christians is they gathered because they wanted to be there. They had something to celebrate. They weren't there going to the big temples and sacrificing and hoping that somehow the gods would do something with the weather. Like, they gathered because of a shared common joy they had with one another. And luckily for us, we have an insight into what it was like in the first century. So I'm going to read today from the book in the New Testament called Acts. And the author of it was Luke. Luke is the same Luke who wrote the Gospel of Luke, one of the biographies we have of Jesus' life. He was a doctor, and he gave an orderly account of the events around Jesus' life. And so the book of Acts, the Acts of the Apostles, kind of like part 2 of the Gospel of Luke. And the Gospel of Luke is obviously written about Jesus' life up to his death and resurrection. And then the book of Acts was written about what then happened with the growth of the church after the resurrection and ascension of Jesus. And here's one of the insights we get into like the first church. Just check it out. It says in Acts chapter 4, that's all my segues. There we go. All the believers were in one heart and mind. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, why can't everyone, all the Christians in the world be in one heart? Because they were in one literal geographical place. All the Christians on the planet at this point were in Jerusalem. So that idea is pretty easy, right? But it's a principle we can learn here. All the believers were in one heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything that they had. From the very beginning, the Jesus way wasn't pushed enforced through power or violence or coercion or laws. From the very beginning, with this kind of dynamic, the church, followers of Jesus, their gathering grew kind of like a garden. It grew organically, it grew naturally. In many cases, it grew like a family, a community, which is interesting because this is exactly what they meant when they used the word church. And we know language and words have meaning, and meanings and words can change throughout history. Many of you obviously already know that. But one of the tragedies we've had around this idea of church is that the meaning has been changed. Because of that, some of the ways we engage with this biblical idea has, for sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, been mixed up. And pretty much every single time in the New Testament we hear the word church, we can read the word church, beginning with when Jesus talked about it, is the Greek word ecclesia, which means a community of called out ones. Can we throw that up? Throw that slide up. We got it? There it is. A community of called out ones. So this is, and I realize I didn't highlight the C there, so I'm sure all the English people here are going, oh, that makes sense, just roll with me. Seeing if you're paying attention. A community of called out ones, right? It was the gathering. It spoke of the people. It spoke of their mission. It spoke of their uniqueness, right? But as language changed and evolved and translations happened, the word ecclesia that we get the word church from started to take on different meanings. So people would go to a church service, and then eventually we just started shortening it to referring to the service we had as we had church. Or there was a building that would house the events of a church, and so we're going to the church building, and eventually got shortened to we're going to church, right? You get that? And so unfortunately, this word now is used interchangeably for so many different reasons, and it can then lose what the original idea was, right? Then from the very beginning, it's not like the church was known for its cathedrals or its buildings. It wasn't known for a geographical location. It was known for being a called out community of Jesus followers. It spoke of the people. And so as a consequence, what identified Jesus followers, what identified the church, wasn't just about what they believed together, it was also about how they lived together. So a lot of the recordings about the church, yes, it recorded how their incredible faith led them to believe incredible things, but what was alongside of it the whole time was how they lived together. How they lived together, how they did community, how they shared, which makes sense. If you're with us in our last series, we finished last week by saying, Jesus said the one thing that will identify you as a Jesus follower is how you love one another, right? So this was always supposed to be part of the witness and part of Christian practice. And the reason this is important and why you're here listening to this today, there is always a chance that you and I can lose something of the message of Jesus when we don't experience or participate in the family of Christ, or the body of Christ, or the household of Christ, or the ecclesia. And in the next verse, it kind of fleshes out how that's actually worked in practice from the very beginning. Let's go on and read on. So from time to time, those who owned land or houses, they sold them. They brought the money from the sales, and they put it at the apostles' feet. The apostles, like the leaders of the church. And it was distributed to anyone who had need. Okay, this is a remarkable dynamic that existed at the time. And then it gets specific about one particular instance in the next verse. It says, Joseph, who was a Levite, we'll come back to that term Levite, that's one of the Jewish tribes. Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, so it's kind of like a nickname. He sold a field that he owned, and he brought the money and he put it at the apostles' feet. Now, you have to be aware, this wasn't a teaching, right? This wasn't a doctrine that to join the church, you're joining an idea where you all have to corral your money together. You're forced to do this. If you own land, it wasn't that at all. This was an overflow. People who had much and had an excess said, well, I've got something. Like, how do I love people around me? There's people in need. I got stuff. I can do something with it, right? So it was an overflow of their faith in Christ. But what's amazing is this idea of this guy called Barnabas, originally named Joseph. I find it remarkable that they gave him this kind of name, son of encouragement. Have you ever had someone that is like that for you? Like when you are discouraged or low, perhaps some of you have felt like that walking into the church this morning. Maybe it's why you've tuned in online, maybe after the fact that you're looking for some kind of encouragement. Where do you turn to? The fact that there was a person in the community whose reputation, I guess they were known for being an incredible encourager, says something to me, because I care about what I'm known for, right? And you should care about what you're known for and what you contribute to people's lives. And it's remarkable to me that Barnabas here, of all the things he could have been known for, he was known as son of encouragement. And what stands out to me remarkably about this, and it's worth us taking note of, is that even the apostles needed someone to encourage them. Think of this. Barnabas, best we can tell, was not there for the life of Christ. He became a Jesus follower after hearing about the message of Jesus following his resurrection, right? So he wasn't there. But even the apostles needed someone with them to encourage them. The apostles were those who walked with Jesus himself in the flesh for over 3 years. Think of it. They were there to hear every Jesus message straight out of his mouth. They were there when they saw Jesus feed 5,000 people with a little picnic lunch. They were there when they saw Jesus walk on water. They were there when they saw Jesus stop the wind and the waves with the word. You get where I'm going with this, right? They were there when they saw Jesus resurrect Lazarus from the dead. They were there when Jesus walked up to the funeral of a young boy and said, "Come alive," and he came up out of the coffin. They were there for these remarkable experiences that authenticated who Jesus was. They were there for all of them. They witnessed Jesus' death and burial. And then they were there and witnessed him walk again and appear to over 500 eyewitnesses. Those guys and gals who were there for all of that still needed some people in their life to encourage their faith. And if those who were there with Jesus needed someone to encourage their faith, how much more you and I? And so to ever think, I don't need to be in an environment, I don't need to be around people that specifically encourage my faith, you do. You need it. And my encouragement to you and through this series is that you wouldn't wait till you need it to be in a place where you get it. Don't kind of exclude community and sharing and people who would be for you to when emergencies arise in your life. And I'll get to that in a little bit to explain why. But I bring this story up of Barnabas to ask the question of you and I. He was called, son of encouragement based off how he lived and shared. My question is, what are you called? When people talk about you now, if you're not part of Suncoast Church or Impact Church, like you can get off the hook with this one, right? But still, if you've got your own friendship groups, what are you known as? The guy or the girl who does what? What's your nickname? What's your reputation? What do people call you? What's your church name? What's your other name? When I was about 14, 15. I remember this specifically, obviously it's a formative time in your young adult years, and I'm asking questions of faith and church and God and all that. You might not be doing that at your age, but I was. And so I wrestled with a whole lot of these ideas. I was asking questions about my future. And then I went to a youth group meeting somewhere in town. It might have been 30 kids or so there. And there was a guest speaker up from Adelaide named Dave. And he was in his early 20s at the time, and he came to speak at this meeting. I'd never heard of him or met him before. And for whatever reason, after the meeting, the guy just took an interest in me and was chatting after the meeting, going, "Man, you're awesome," and just started just kind of calling out some of the good he saw in my life. And I was with a few of my buddies, and I was like, this guy's what? No one had spoken to me like this, saying, "Dude, you got amazing things for your future." And at 14, you know everything that's wrong with you. You're also arrogant. You think you know everything that's right. You got all the opinions of the world. So no one's taken the time to actually put the arm around you and say, dude. You do know, you don't have to try hard. You're doing awesome. God's got a great future for you. It impacted me so much. He invited me and my mates out later, to get a milkshake later on, and we're hanging out. And encouraged us and spoke into our lives. And as we were all leaving, he was leaving with the guys who were hosting him. He's like, "Hey, Jono, by the way, I don't know, man, just God bless you." And he handed me $200. And when you're 14 and some dude just gives you $200, you're like, "What's the catch?" There's no catch, man. God bless you. I didn't see him again for years and years and years and years. And I was like, but it left an impact with me. Now, he's doing his thing for God now, and he pastors a great church, and he travels all over the world speaking all those things. I was a nobody, still am. And yet he took time to affirm me and encourage me. And I remember that. It was encouragement that left an indelible mark on my life. Now, think about this. How many of us have stories where the opposite has left the same kind of mark on our life? Right? That someone has something nasty, called you a name that wasn't nice, whatever it might be. Encouragement is the antidote to that. And I say this all the time, there's enough discouragement to go around to sink the Titanic twice over, right? So not only what are you called, I'm telling you, as your pastor, I'm the one who's had the responsibility of leading this faith community. I care about what we are called as well. And when people talk about us as a church community, what do they call us? This is why our mission is, we talk about this all the time, that we would be a church that loves like Jesus. Come on. And to build a church that the unchurched love. And some people criticize that, saying you're trying to impress all. No, we're not. Like, we just think that our community should be grateful that Suncoast Church exists. Right? Then we talk about Suncoast Church, they might be like, oh, what you guys believe is pretty weird. Like, I don't believe it. But man, I'm grateful you guys are in our city doing what you're doing. Like, you guys make Christmas. Like, we're grateful that there's hundreds of homeless people that have a chance of getting food every day because you guys exist. I'm grateful that you guys provide opportunities for kids who would otherwise be on the streets and otherwise be partaking in activities that will end them up in jail or worse. And you're creating environments to believe in the next generation. Like, I might not believe everything you guys believe, but your people are the best people. I want to employ them. Like, on your resume, oh, you go to Suncoast Church, you're employed. Or like, I don't believe your stuff, but like the guys in your church, the young man, I want my daughter to marry one of the guys from your church. Like, they treat women, you get what I'm saying, right? Right? So that's why it matters what people say about us. Jesus said, come on, he said, you're supposed to be the light of the world. When we talk about the church, he said, you'll be like a city on a hill. Right? So when people talk about Suncoast, when people talk about impact, may they always say, I am glad that those people are in our community. They make our community better. They make our community brighter. They are the most encouraging group of, they're weird, but they are the most encouraging people on the planet. And don't get me, like, you do that. You guys are awesome at that. You're the best at it. So I feel like I'm, talking to the choir. Okay, so Barnabas, returning to our friend Barnabas, son of encouragement. Now, we don't hear too much of Barnabas through scriptures. We only have little glimpses of him. But one of the things that history argues in his favor is that he was the author of the infamous unauthored book of the New Testament. We have a book called Hebrews. Now, we don't know the author exactly because they don't say it. But we do know a couple of things about it. Number one, that in the first century, obviously the believers knew who the author was because they kept the letter and they circulated it, which meant it just must have been oral tradition, that they valued it enough that they saw it came from someone credible, so they kept it. Barnabas was someone credible. Whoever wrote the book of Hebrews had to have a deep understanding of Levitical law because there was so much analogy to Old Testament writings in there. And again, Barnabas was from the tribe of Levi. Also, most theologians conclude it wasn't Paul who wrote it. If you're not familiar with who Paul is, Paul wrote about half of our New Testament, but he would always write, my name is Paul, right at the beginning. And he had a certain style to his writings. Doesn't say this in the book of Hebrews, but there are certain phrases that are similar to Paul, which would argue that whoever's writing this would have had similar theological conversations with Paul. Barnabas was friends with Paul. And also, this is kind of what I think it was Barnabas. All the way through it, it has this encouraging tone to it. And in fact, it overtly says a whole lot of things about encouragement through the book. I'm like, clearly, it was a son of encouragement. But who am I? I'm not a theologian. So anyways, there's this one verse in the book of Hebrews where it alludes to this idea of church and gathering and encouragement. If you've been in church for longer than a day, you know exactly where I'm going with this, right? But this has been used so much on Facebook and social media, and people quote this over the last 2 years around so many times. So I thought, let's lean into it. Let's get some clarity around what Barnabas was trying to say. This is Hebrews chapter 10, just one verse, verse 25. He says, not giving up, meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but here it is, encouraging one another. And all the more as you see the day approaching. The author of Hebrews / Barnabas argues that encouragement was one of the primary goals of Christians meeting together. Encouragement. That Christian community is designed for the encouragement of our faith. And I said it earlier, for the first followers of Jesus, gathering wasn't a duty, it was a joy. They didn't do it to tick a religious box or to be religiously pious. It was an overflow of what they'd experienced with Christ. And here's the thing about it. The place wasn't what was most important. The purpose was. That's why they don't necessarily talk about that had to be in this building, had to be in this environment. In fact, it's worth noting that Jesus himself never specifically for the New Testament understanding of faith, never made a geographical site or a location or a building somewhat holy. Right? We've done that. We've attached significance. Like Chloe and I got to visit Jerusalem a number of years ago, And obviously for a Jesus follower, it's remarkable to walk through those streets and to get a sense of history and the reality that took place there. But Jesus never said, if you're a Jesus follower, you must worship these stones and you must set up. He didn't. That's why he never, don't set up statues, don't set up idols. He gave no things or places or geography a particular holy kind of place in the Christian faith. In fact, in the New Testament, it teaches us that the temple was a specific place under the Old Covenant, under the Old Law, the Old Testament. The temple is a specific place, but in the New Testament, they teach us that the temple is now you. That God's Spirit on earth wasn't to dwell in a building, behind a curtain, in an inner place. You are now that temple. That God's Spirit desires to make its home. Think of that. In you. For thousands of years, Jewish believers once a year would come to the temple, and just the high priest once a year could go beyond the curtain that was in the most inner place of the Jewish temple to be able to experience the presence of God. To know that you could experience that daily in your life right now, it would have blown their minds to think that was a promise that was coming. But you and I get that promise. It's where God's presence now resides. This is why what is holy, what is set apart, what's valuable in the eyes of God is not a place or a building as such. It's you. And it's a person sitting next to you. It's a person who works next to you. It's your neighbor whose dog always does their business on your lawn. It's the neighbor whose kid is learning drums. You get where I'm going with this, right? Jesus was able to bring the bigness, because in our Old Testament, a lot of the shadow, it was illustrations, it was a picture of what to come. And he brought that all in to say, do you realize the way you worship God now is by how you love the person standing in front of you? They are created in the image of God. The way you worship me and show your devotion to me is how you do community, how you love one another, how you share, how you're generous. That's why often in the New Testament, gathering wasn't simply to please God, but it is also to encourage man. You've probably heard it say before that it's the saying that it's hard to hate up close. Have you heard that before? It's easy if you if there's someone on the other side of a social media post, you know who they are, you can hate away, you know. If it's a group that lives in another part of the world that thinks differently or believes, it's easy to hate. But when you're sitting across the table from someone, eye to eye, it's hard to hate up close. But in the same way, it can be difficult to love at a distance. And perhaps this is why one of the fundamental practices of Jesus' followers was to gather, was to be close, was to do community. It's amazing that he said these words in the verse we just read. He said, not giving up meeting together. I have found that often the antidote, right? So I realize I missed the slide, which was encouragement, so you can click that one, but let's go to the next one then. The antidote often to giving up is encouragement. He said, not giving up meeting together. Have you ever felt, or do you feel right now like giving up? And as much as it can be a cliched catch-all statement, let's be real. There's been a lot of reason to give up on things over the last 2 years. A lot of reasons. And perhaps some of you even tempted today to give up on something important. Perhaps considering giving up on your marriage. Maybe you're giving up on a kid. You've tried your hardest and you're done. Maybe for some of you even giving up on hope or a dream. Maybe even your faith. I just want to say I get that, and I affirm that feeling. That's a real thing. And it's because of that real thing that the Christians were like at the beginning. We need to make sure that encouragement, this thing, it's not to just add more burden onto people and to add more jobs and responsibilities and guilt people to do more for God. It was like, how do we do life in such a way that we all need encouragement? And if you're feeling like giving up on something, I want to encourage you to stay connected to the community of faith, however that looks. Don't give up. God is for you. And if you're doing well, you're needed. We need your encouragement. And I'm so proud of how you guys go about this. Man, Chloe and I feel like we barely hear half the story, but from just the stories we do about how you guys are generous, how you guys are caring, how often we hear about people praying and texting, the stories, we see people when they're in ISO and people just throw over goodies to their house and love them. Families go through things with sick kids or kids in hospital and people get around and pray for them and love them. We hear these stories. This is a big deal. And often the difference between someone giving up staying in it is because someone gave them a good dose of encouragement. It could come from you. But more than that, and I'll finish with this, he draws this link between our faith being encouraged and our habits. Let's read the verse again. Next slide. It says, not giving up meeting together, some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. Here's my point. Encouragement in faith is often linked to habits of faith, to our habits. Now, I don't think I need to talk too much on this. We talk about this regularly in this community, but it's worth saying, for our faith to grow and for you to be consistently encouraged, you must take stock of your daily habits in your life. Now think about this for a moment. I know you get this because you're smart, right? I've heard it said multiple times that the vast majority of our successes can be directly linked to our daily habits. That like 90% of the things that you deem successful, you can draw it because of I put in daily disciplines and daily habits in my life. Again, if you're married here, you'd nod your head probably the idea that a great marriage isn't built by going on a great date just once. Right? Amen? Good preaching? Some of you are like, I'm taking notes down. Like, that's my problem. No well-adjusted and likable child is raised by having one deep conversation with them just once. Right? I talked to you about this last June. Thanks, Dad. You know? No, you get that. It's consistent. Come on, right? This might not sound spiritual, but it's spiritual enough for them to see it right in the New Testament. We need good habits and disciplines and commitments and faithfulness and commitments to some kind of things in our life because we have lungs and we have a heartbeat and we need encouragement. We are people. No healthy physical condition is created because you drank a Diet Coke just once. Won't do it. You need to be drinking Diet Coke every, Classic. Health and as a consequence, growth is built by our habits, right? You get this, right? And it's the same with encouraging our faith. Look, what are your habits of faith? Now, I'm not going to put legalism or law or tell you to do that. You need to find your things that you regular. So as a church community, okay, we try and on your seat, there's that card there and it gives you a little head inside of what's coming up. Scan the QR code, take it home. It'll bring you to a landing page which has way bigger list of all the stuff. Now, here's the thing. The church team here, our staff, we create things, but we're not going to shove you or force you there and say, if you don't go, you're not Christian. They're not. They're there to help serve you and create environments that you can benefit from, that you can lean into and leverage for your own encouragement. So lean into it. Maybe if you're married here, talk to one another. Go home today and go, how can we kind of like maybe lean into community a little more this year? If you're someone who engages online, we love you. Maybe go this year. Like, something I can do a little bit more to engage in and lean in this year? Because not only will it encourage you, someone needs the courage that you've got. And maybe God will encourage another life through you and your example. Now, here's the thing. You and I all have habits, whether intentionally or unintentionally, you've got them. So be intentional about them. Create them. If you're a parent here, create them intentionally for your kids. Right? Don't let the kids set the tone of what the habits of your home is. You set it. Be intentional about the future you believe for your kids. So we're going to do this. We believe in you. If kids want to do what they want to do, we all know how great that went with our in childhood, right? Like, so if you're like, man, I want my kid to grow up in a world that's competing views and ideas and the world's this. So you put in good habits for your home. So my kids and my household, man, we're going to have these habits. We're going to be an encouraging home. Every single night when all my family's asleep, I pray over all my children as they're sleeping that their lives would be filled with hope and that from that, their lives would overflow with hope into the world around them. I do it every single night, even though I'm tired, this, that, and the other. I do it. These are habits I put in place in my life to help encourage the faith of my family and encourage my own faith. So here's the 2 points I want to leave you with today. Number one is maintain a habit of gathering. I don't mind how you do it. It could be a Sunday thing for you. It could be a volunteering thing for you in a connect group. I saw someone I hadn't seen for ages the other day, and they were like making food for homeless people. And I was like, for our soup kitchen, I was like, that is amazing. Like, I know a lot of you guys, your connection and your habits and your gathering is in so many different spaces. But whatever it is, make a habit of it. Don't just leave it as like the last off on your list. Make a habit of it. And secondly, one another you're gathering. He said, hey, don't give up meeting together. Some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, let's keep at it. Here's the thing. Your idea of church and involvement and all these things, I'm telling you, it goes to another level and it goes to another depth of meaning for you when it doesn't just become about what you get, and what you can consume. But you realize that God has given you something to contribute, that he has given you specific spiritual gifts to contribute to the body of Christ, that you have a voice, that your wisdom is needed. Listen, if you're a committed member of this church and you've been coming here for years and you're not volunteering somewhere, there are so many departments in the Life Fair Church every day this week that are desperate for more volunteers. And if you're just asking, I need more, I'm respectfully asking you, you'll get more when you give more. Come on, we need you. We just need you. The kingdom of God needs you. You have something of incredible worth. And when you realize, hey, I can one another with my gathering, how can I encourage someone else? Your whole experience of faith and church may just well go to another level. And you might find yourself as well in very good company. Other than that, God bless you. Thanks for being here today. Listen, if you are a parent of young kids here today, right now, you can head straight up to the kids department. The doors are open and they have a special surprise for you. They want you to participate and join in with the last bit of their kid service today. So you can do, if you've got the sticker and the code, show it at the doors are open. You can experience that now. You will love it to get a little insight what happens with the kids. And enjoy the family fun day we got organized for everyone after the service. Look forward to seeing you next week as we continue our series. God bless you.